Hey guys, welcome to the fourth installment of the BioLane video log. Today we're going to kind of stick with the theme from last week and actually talk about non-philosophical stuff. Talk about a little bit of nutrition today. My PhD, my forte is protein metabolism. I did my PhD in protein metabolism. And it can be very painful for me sometimes to hear people talk about protein. There's a lot of people who really butcher the science, or in many cases don't even care about the science, and just say random things, I think, for effect. So I'm gonna go over some common protein misconceptions, and hopefully it'll provide some good insight for you guys. The first one is, probably what I hear the most, is that you can only absorb, I don't know, X amount of protein in a meal. You can only absorb, let's say 30 grams of protein. I hear that one a lot. No, completely wrong. In fact, you're not even, that isn't even the right question for what most people are really wanting to ask. The real question they're wanting to ask is, what is the amount of protein that's going to max out the anabolic response? But they say, what's the max amount of protein I can absorb, because they just assume absorption is equal to utilization. That's not the case. You can absorb almost any amount of protein in a meal. I mean, the research shows that if you eat a ton of protein at a meal, you will absorb almost all of it. I mean, assuming it's a bioavailable source, you will absorb, like if I had 200 grams of whey, yeah, it's a lot of that, almost all of that's going to get into my bloodstream at a certain point. What happens is your body just slows down digestion to a certain rate to accommodate for the influx of amino acids so it can dispose of them and handle them. So absorption-wise, you're going to get all of it. The question is now, how much of that is actually going to induce an anabolic response? How much of that's going to be used for muscle building? The anabolic response seems to get maxed out probably around, for most people with a high quality protein source like eggs or whey, 30 to 40 grams for the average male is going to max out an anabolic response. You might get a slight elevation on what you need if you're older. When you get older, you get less sensitive to amino acids. It takes more to get the same anabolic response. But for most people, 30 to 40 grams of a high quality protein source is definitely going to max out the anabolic response. Now, that's not to say more protein is bad. It's not going to hurt you. Within reason. And that brings me to my next point, which is the health concerns about protein. A lot of people talk about how protein is harmful for you. The probably most common one is, well, don't eat a lot of protein because it's bad for your kidneys. This stems from people who have kidney failure or kidney problems. These people are told to eat low protein diets. The reason is, in order to dispose of the nitrogen on amino acids, so amino acids are different from like carbohydrates and fats because they have a nitrogen group. And you can't just let that nitrogen go around the bloodstream. It's toxic. So your body gets rid of it as urea. And it's eliminated through the kidneys. And so if you eat a lot of protein, it's a little bit more load on the kidneys. And so people who have kidney failure are told to eat low protein typically. Well, one, in healthy individuals, high protein diets have been shown to have absolutely no negative effect on the kidneys. And two, even in people with renal failure, there's actually some evidence that low protein diets actually impairs kidney repair. In fact, there was a study. I don't think it's come out yet, but someone I know at the University of Illinois, I believe they supplemented people who had renal failure with like 25 grams of whey protein isolate, and they actually found that it helped their kidneys. So it's definitely not a clear-cut issue, but I'm not ready to say that high protein diets are good for people with renal failure. But I'm certainly confident in saying that people who have healthy kidneys should not be worried about a high protein diet, within reason. That said, a certain amount of protein intakes, 500-600 grams of protein are so absurdly high, they've never been tested. And so I wouldn't recommend those. And they're totally unnecessary. But for people who are eating a high protein diet, a traditional high protein diet, you're talking 250 grams of protein a day. There's no evidence that harms kidneys. And you also hear kind of the same thing about liver disease. Protein's bad for your liver. Again, there's no evidence that a high protein diet is bad for the liver. I think this probably comes about because a lot of people who are on high protein diets, they'll go in to get blood work done, and they'll see that their liver enzymes are elevated, their creatinine is elevated, and a lot of these other markers of liver damage and kidney damage. You need to understand something very important. Having an elevated marker in the blood does not mean that you have kidney damage or liver damage. It's just an indicator. It's only a corollary factor. Let me put it to you this way. If you have kidney failure and you have liver problems as well, you will absolutely have elevated liver enzymes and elevated creatinine and elevated blood urea nitrogen. Okay? But just because you may have those things doesn't mean you have liver failure or kidney problems. Okay? Most people who have more muscle than average are going to have elevated blood urea nitrogen, are going to have elevated creatinine. In fact, creatinine is an indicator of muscle mass. So just having that elevated does not mean you have kidney failure. That's something that's completely misinterpreted by a lot of medical practitioners. Now, if you go in and you get blood work done and you have elevated liver enzymes, you have elevated creatinine or elevated blood urea nitrogen, you should get a follow-up test done. You should get a 24-hour urine collection, an ultrasound or whatever, some kind of panel to actually look at how your kidneys are functioning, how your liver is functioning. But 99 times out of 100, you're not going to have an actual problem. I can't tell you how many times I've had people say, well, I had to stop taking high protein because they said I had kidney failure. And then when I actually asked them what they measured, they say, well, they found it in my blood. No, you can't tell if somebody has kidney failure from the blood. You have to actually look at a kidney function test. So, again, just because you have those elevated markers does not mean you have kidney failure or liver failure. And again, with a healthy liver, healthy kidneys, there's absolutely no evidence that a high protein diet causes any kind of damage. And another thing that's come out that's kind of freaked people out is the China study, which is basically, let me be clear, it's not a study, okay? The China study is basically a fancy correlation study where they found that people who ate more meat had higher rates of cancer and vascular disease. And so they use that to say, oh, protein's bad. Let me be perfectly clear on this. It's a hack job of science, in my opinion. One, the reason that high protein or meat intake is associated with cancer and cardiovascular disease is one, diets high in meat are higher fat and higher calorie, and people who consume these typically eat higher calories. Two, people who eat more meat typically eat less vegetables and less overall fiber, so they have higher rates of colon cancer. Three, people who eat higher meat tend to exercise less and eat less vegetables. That's obviously not the case with a bodybuilder. And four, people who eat higher amounts of meat tend to ingest more polyaromatic hydrocarbons, which are basically the charred portions of your meat. Like if you overcook meat and you have a charred portion of it, you're going to have these charred portions are actually carcinogenic. But there's an easy way to figure it out. You just cut off the charred portion of meat and you're fine. So if you char your meat, make sure you cut off the charred portions. But that being said, when you statistically correct for those variables, when you statistically correct for higher fat intake, when you statistically correct for the low fiber intake, exercise, and the hydrocarbons, meat has no association with cancer or vascular disease, no more so than carbohydrate or fat. So again, it's kind of that picking and choosing of data that really irritates me. Correlation studies are fine. It's good to develop trends. Correlation does not equal causation. I'll say it again. Correlation does not equal causation. And let me give you a good example of that. In the summer months, ice cream sales increase, okay? In the summer months, the rate of murder also increases. So the correlation is that increased ice cream sales are associated with increased murder rates. Okay? Does anybody out there actually think that the ice cream is causing people to murder each other? Because if you buy ice cream, you are more likely to be murdered or more likely to be a murderer. It's absolutely ridiculous. So don't draw a causation from a correlation. Any beginner in science knows this. And unfortunately, we have scientists out there who try to make a name for themselves by overextending their data, which is exactly what's happened in this case. So again, correlation does not equal causation. And then one other thing I'd like to touch on is, I hear this a lot from vegetarians. I'm not trying to pick on vegetarians. If you're a vegetarian because you like animals or whatever, that's fine. I mean, it's not for me, but I don't judge it. I respect people's decision for whatever they want to do. But I don't like it when they try to validate their decision by making up lies. And I've seen some vegetarians say, oh, well, we weren't meant to eat meat. Wrong, we have canine teeth, we're definitely meant to eat meat. Our digestive systems weren't meant to metabolize meat, we don't have the enzymes for it. Yeah, we do. Pepsin, trypsin, chymotrypsin, all good for meat. And then the other one that I really chuckle at is, oh, well, you can only digest 4 ounces of meat per week or per day or whatever it is. That would be the most stupid thing I've ever heard in my life. If you only digested that much meat, like let's say you could only digest 4 ounces of meat at a time, right? That would mean every time you ate more than that, you would have explosive diarrhea. And you would crap out whole parts of food, okay? I promise you, go eat an 8-ounce steak tonight. You will not crap out 4 ounces of steak tomorrow. I can assure you of that. So, no. You can metabolize it just fine. So yeah, it's just unfortunately we get a lot of people who listen to misinformation and spread it, and so hopefully this video log has served the dual function of allowing me to vent and rant about protein myths, and also educating you guys on kind of what the data actually says versus what it's been portrayed to say. So hope you guys have enjoyed the 4th video log, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.